President Bush should not be judged so harshly for having acted on faulty information. Quote, well, I think he used the information that he had at the time. If that information was faulty, I can't see how it would be his fault. Selective exposure. Ignoring the information without rebutting it or supporting it with other positions. In fact, many people simply refuse to continue to engage in the discussion with contradictory information. Quote, I'm going to pass on this one for now. Disputing rationality. Arguing that opinions do not need to be grounded in facts or reasoning. The researcher's example of how this strategy was used by one person is very telling. Interviewer. The September 11th Commission found no link between Saddam and 9/11, and this is what President Bush said. This is what the Commission said. Do you have any comments on either of these? Respondent. Well, I bet they say that the Commission didn't have proof of it, but I guess we can still have our opinions and feel that way even though that is what they say. And finally, inferred justification, a strategy that infers evidence which would support the respondent's beliefs. Now this last one is very interesting. Basically, respondents retrospectively invented the causal links necessary to justify a favored politician's actions. Quote, inferred justification operates as a backward chain of reasoning that justifies the favored opinion by assuming the causal evidence that would support it. Now, does this sound at least vaguely familiar to anyone, particularly after hearing yesterday's testimony on the supposedly scientific methods used to determine that fires brought down the World Trade Centers? Perhaps this should be NIST's new logo. Lest you think that these kinds of reactions are just responses in a laboratory setting, I have a personal story to share with you that I hope will trouble you as much as it did me. It occurred during a friendly and casual conversation with a gentleman I had just met who was a lifelong resident of Florida. We talked about the weather first, then our careers, and then about our families and our concerns for the future, and then finally, politics and the future of America. Well, I'll tell you what I think really needs to happen to set this country straight, he said. Since this gentleman had so far given wonderful advice on how to stay married for over 40 years while raising a family, how to build a successful career, and how to be an upstanding member of one's community, and how he even fought in the Vietnam War, I listened pretty carefully. This is what he said. What this country needs is for some of those Al-Qaeda terrorists that attacked us on 9/11 to walk into an American household, put a gun to the head of the father of the house, line up that man's wife and children against a wall, and make him watch while they shoot everyone in his family. Then, he said, raising his voice just a little, the people in this country will understand what we are fighting to protect over there. This is a true story. After struggling to maintain my composure, I turned to ask him if he would volunteer his family for this in order to save his country. I'm a psychologist, remember? I did not ask him this directly. Instead, I gently asked him if this is not how a family in the Middle East might similarly see some American soldiers.
Absolutely.
He appeared to be honestly surprised by such a scenario, one in which the tables had been turned and the Americans were viewed as the terrorists. Now, this below is a famous photograph taken mere moments after Samar Hassan, a 5-year-old Iraqi girl covered in the blood of her family, had just witnessed her mother and father being shot and killed by American soldiers who opened fire on her family's car as they were on their way to take her sick brother to the hospital. Now, I really did understand the point he was trying to make, perhaps more than he did, and the point is this. that unless it happens to them in their own backyards and perhaps even in their own homes, many people won't take action against what they believe is wrong with their country. Yet perhaps the point that he didn't realize that he was also making, one which is more revealing, is that unless whatever is happening to an American, it just isn't important or wrong. And it is this widespread, deeply entrenched, and false belief in American exceptionalism that is a great threat to true democracy, which is democracy for all. The type of democracy that is packaged and sold to us by the government and news media is what I will refer to throughout this talk as democracy for the few. And it is meant for some, but not for all. The point of this story is to emphasize how honest, decent, hardworking, and upstanding people can come to believe that democracy and freedom from wars of aggression belongs only to them and not to citizens of the world, whether they live in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, or even Libya. And it is this type of biased belief system that permits scads to continue. Indeed, the use of repression and terror, including threats of censorship, suppression of information, imprisonment, and torture by leaders to silence political opponents and dissidents, is not exclusive to authoritarian states. Such tactics can also be employed by leaders of democratic states, a fact that can be difficult for people to acknowledge, especially if it is not consistent with their belief system. A Human Rights Watch World Report repudiated many leaders and governments worldwide as despots, masquerading as democrats. The report described how leaders use rhetoric, fear-mongering, and suppression of a free press to undermine the rule of law, charges that are relevant to the current state of democracy in North America. And I'll quote from the report here. Quote, "Few governments want to be seen as undemocratic. Determined not to let mere facts stand in the way, these rulers have mastered the art of democratic rhetoric that bears little relationship to their practice of governing. The challenge they face is to appear to embrace democratic principles while avoiding any risk of succumbing to popular preferences. Electoral fraud, political violence, press censorship, repression of civil society, and even military rule have all been used to curtail the prospect of the proclaimed process of democratization might actually lead to a popular say in government. Because of these other interests, energy, commerce, counterterrorism, the world's more established democracies too often find it convenient to appear credulous of these sham democrats. Foremost has been the United States under President George W. Bush. In a troubling parallel to abusive governments around the world, the U.S. government has embraced democracy promotion as a softer and fuzzier alternative to defending human rights. Talk of human rights leads to Guantanamo, secret CIA prisons, waterboarding, rendition, military commissions, and the suspension of a habeas corpus. To make matters worse, the Bush administration's efforts to rationalize the invasion of Iraq in terms of democracy promotion has made it easier for autocrats to equate pressure on them to democratize with an imperial militarist agenda." End quote. We must be ever vigilant of the motives of leaders who would persuade us to surrender our property, liberty, and humanity, one priceless piece at a time. How can we do this? First and foremost, by educating ourselves and our fellow citizens on how we, the people, can be manipulated by our government and its lapdog news media into forfeiting our civil liberties and duties. We need to challenge the long-standing and often erroneous assumptions about the role of government, public discourse, and dissent in democratic societies. And we can start by identifying some of the social psychological factors that can prevent people from examining evidence of crimes committed by the state. Now, one of the most important social psychological foundations of democracy is political tolerance. Democracy requires tolerance of different political views. And apparently it requires quite a lot of it if you've ever watched Fox and Friends. Democracy specifically requires tolerance of alternative political views, especially those that may be unpopular, such as public discourse on threats posed by the state towards its citizens. A person's level of political tolerance largely determines his or her support for civil liberties and his or her degree of participation in civic duties such as voting, showing support for free speech, or protesting government restrictions on